Mike. There we go. I think we're live.
Yeah.
Okay.
The light's
So the light will turn on.
I think the light isn't working.
Oh.
There we go. Good evening. Thank you all for being here tonight. Before we begin, I just have a brief statement I'd like to say. I would like to take a moment to thank Director Mike Potachik for his service as board chair last year. As some of you may know, last year was a difficult one for Mike in his personal life. And despite all of that, he led us with grace, patience, wit, and the wisdom of his many years of devoted service to public education. I am very grateful for his leadership and his partnership, and I'm very happy to call him my friend. I will be leaning to him for guidance this year and throughout the year ahead. And to the rest of us on this board, I would just like to say that I'm extremely proud to be working alongside each one of you. And I have confidence that this year will be one of collaboration, new ideas, and great progress. Thank you for allowing me to serve this community, and I am honored to be your chair. And with that, let's get started. Can we have the roll call, please?
Chair Stivlin,
Here.
Vice Chair Pearson,
Here.
Treasurer Riley,
Here.
Clerk Potachik,
Here.
Director Burns,
Here.
Director Pelletier,
Here.
and Director Weisberg.
Here.
You have quorum.
Thank you. Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Can we please have the reading of this district mission statement?
Yes. The mission of Stillwater Area Public Schools, in partnership with students, family, and community, is to develop curious individuals who are active and engaged leaders in an ever-changing world by challenging all students as they travel along their personalized learning pathways.
Thank you. And our school board goals?
School board goals for 2019 and 2020. In partnership with community, parents, students, the School Board of Stillwater Area Public Schools ensures excellence in education by increasing student achievement for all students, securing long-term financial stability of the district, and increasing community trust and engagement.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. And before I ask for a motion to approve, I would like to make a change to the reports item number C, or letter C, the second reading of 209. We have had a request from a board member to return that item back to the policy working group for further discussion before we bring it back to a second reading. So I would like to have a motion to approve the agenda with the removal of item C.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor, raise your right hand and say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Thank you very much. And now it's time for our superintendent report.
Thank you. This evening, the school board had a learning session around our achievement and integration plan over at Oak Park before this meeting this evening. This evening, we engaged in conversation about the past plan and the plans for moving forward. And we'll be looking at that plan again and having a report to the board here formally on February 6th with action requested on February 20th. We welcome feedback from the community, and you're welcome to direct questions to either myself, Eric Anderson, or Rachel Larson regarding that plan. Rob Bach and I also were honored to attend and be keynotes for the first career day at Oakland Middle School yesterday and today. Paul McCarthy and Tom Triplett approached Principal Fields and Bob McDowell about an opportunity to partner with the Stillwater Area Community Foundation to bring community members in to talk about various careers. Over 45 of our community members came in to share with our students about what a day in the life of their career looks like. I'd like to thank Andy Fields, Kyle Kane, and Heather Gates for their extreme energy for this endeavor to give our kids this opportunity. When we were there yesterday, the kids were excited, and we just want to thank I'm not going to read them right now, but all 45 of the people who came to spend time with our kids. It was really an incredible opportunity, and we hope to have that move to Stillwater, Stillwater Middle School also next year. This week has also been designated by Governor Walz as Coaches and Advisors Recognition Week, and we just found out recently that it's also going to be Paraprofessional Recognition Week next week. So in recognition of Thank a Coach and Advisor Week, we honor and support more than the 325 coaches and advisors in our school district that make an integral, positive, and lifelong impact on our students, as well as the countless others who volunteer as coaches for our clubs and organizations within the Stillwater community. Coaches and advisors inspire, motivate, and challenge our students to be their very best every day. They have a lasting and powerful impact on our lives and on our youth. Thank you to the coaches and advisors, and thank you to our paraprofessionals who really come to work every day with tremendous energy to be able to support our students. We really appreciate what you do for our kids every day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is the student report, and we have Elise and Kuluk here with the report for us. Who's going first?
I am.
Elise. Okay, thank you.
So for the academic report, we don't have too many new things, except last week was our finals week, and then this week some people have new schedules as we're starting the new second and final semester of the year. And then the One Act is hosting a competition at the high school tonight, and that's in the theater department. So we saw a lot of kids dressed up and ready to perform as we were leaving school today. And then there's a hockey game tonight. We are against Woodbury tonight, so good luck to the hockey team. And then some events that Student Council has coming up. We have our annual winter dance called Snowball, and that's coming up on Saturday, February 1st, and that will be held at the JX Event Center in downtown Stillwater. And then we have Blast Week coming up, which is a pretty big event for us. And we'll be having various speakers coming in to give presentations and demonstrations throughout the week. And then the week will be ending on a high note with Battle of the Bands on Friday the 14th, which is our event that everyone is open to come to. So we would love to see some community members there if you can make it. And then Blast Week is just always a super fun, high energy week that we're all looking very forward to.
And then just to add on to the academic report, to be specific, AVID, there's been over 50 four-year acceptances overall in the senior AVID class this year, and 8 two-year college acceptances, compared to last year with 23 four-year acceptances and 16 two-years. Today, the juniors and seniors went to classes of underclassmen to speak on their experience and why they continued with AVID. Some of the things I heard was, quote, AVID is the reason why I filed my FAFSA, which is a really big, important part of it, applying for colleges, getting free grant money from, the state. And some upperclassmen are actually going to the middle schools and at the high school to give back by being tutors in their AVID classes. NASA, our Native American student organization at our school, is having their traditional ribbon skirt making workshop next week, and the Korean Pop Club and so many other are preparing for the talent show, which is also part of our Blast Week. And that's a report. Thank you.
Awesome. Before we move on, can you guys remind us what BLAST stands for? Because I love it.
BLAST stands for Be Loving and Sharing Together.
It's very cool.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Chair
an exciting time of
Stivling,
year.
can I add one more thing that I forgot during my report?
Absolutely.
I don't know how I could. On Saturday is the Partnership Plans Da Vinci Fest, and I know that many of you in the audience have been there before. It's an amazing endeavor that the partnership puts on that is centered around science and art and upscaling or upcycling, I guess is the name for it this year. And so families are welcome to come from 1 until 5 o'clock over at the high school. If you haven't attended before, I really encourage you to do so. We have 45 different clubs throughout the community that will be there. We'll have our art from throughout the valley from our students and also science demonstrations. So it's a great way to get out in Stillwater. There are some other things going on in downtown Stillwater, I know too. So try to make Da Vinci Fest one of your stops along the way and see some great work from our students. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Thank you for saying that. It is truly an amazing experience. It's something that makes everyone happy and proud to be a pony. And if you haven't gone, I definitely concur. You need to go. All right, moving on. We have recognition. And I'll send that back to you.
Yes, we do. Anna Weaver, I see you, Anna. And if you would mind coming up, please, to be recognized by the board. I'll read you just a little bit about Anna. We're happy to have her here with us today. She is the 2019-20 state cross-country champion, and she's the second individual state cross-country champion. Anna took 14th place at the Foot Locker Nationals in San Diego, California, 29th at the Nike NXN Nationals in Portland, Oregon, and she was the state champion for Minnesota. That just gives me chills saying that. Like, I can't even imagine. Last spring, she finished 4th in the 1,600-meter run and 2nd in the 3,200-meter run as a sophomore. She's a 4.0 student and just came off her best semester with a 4.267 GPA. Currently, she's a varsity of the Nordic team that's ranked 2nd in the state. So, Anna, thanks for being here tonight. And I know the board will have some questions, but if you just want to say a few words, that would be great.
Oh yeah, thanks for having me. It's such a pleasure. I just wanted to thank my coaches and my family and friends and teammates and just the Stillwater community in general. I'm super proud to be a pony, and it's such a supportive community, and it's just been amazing.
And is that your dad in the audience with you?
Yeah.
Thanks, Dad, for being here tonight, too.
Yeah. Congratulations.
Thank
My
you.
gosh, that's amazing.
Thank you so much.
I just want to know, what's your secret? How can you be so successful? That's amazing.
Well, definitely the team just brings in such a positive environment, and it just makes training fun. And so when we push each other in healthy competition, and the coaches are so supportive, and everybody just pushes each other, and so everybody just keeps improving, and it's really fun.
Awesome. Thank you. Anybody else? Yeah.
So tell us how fast. What's your fastest time?
Well, cross country is 5K, and I got a PR at the regional meet of 17:27.
Very cool.
Amazing. Go ahead.
Anna, what goes through your head when you're running for that state title, number one, that last quarter mile? Do you remember anything that stands out?
Yeah, it was incredible. I mean, it was kind of like a dream, and I didn't know that what was happening. I was kind of just in a zone, and I was just thinking like, wow, like stay focused, but stay relaxed and have fun with it. And I think like when I put a smile on my face, it really helps me to have fun with it and stay relaxed instead of getting overwhelmed about trying to make every little thing right, and just have fun with it. And yeah.
Cool.
Fantastic. Anybody else? Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks. I am so impressed with you. As an old lady who was a has-been in running, I've done some marathons and I have old bones now and all that, but the biggest thing that I can say, previous runner to runner, is it's fortitude. It's inner strength, perseverance, never giving up, believing in yourself, and you clearly exemplify that, not only, when you're running, but also academically. You are such a great example, representative of this district, kiddo, so keep going. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
All right. The next item on our agenda is the open forum. And before we begin, I have a statement I would like to read to the audience. If you wish to speak to the school board, you will be able to do so at the start of the school board meeting during open forum. You may sign in only for yourself, not other individuals or groups, and only in person. The sign-in sheet is made available 30 minutes prior to and up to the start of the meeting. Due to time limitations, we will limit the number of speakers to 15, with each speaker receiving 3 minutes. If you spoke at the last meeting, please consider allowing others to speak, to sign in before you. After you address the board, please leave the podium. Stillwater Area School District welcomes input from citizens as community involvement fosters better decision-making and improved learning experiences for all students. While comments and questions are welcome during open forum, law prohibits the board from discussing concerns about individual employees or students in a public meeting. We will stop the proceedings immediately if employee or student privacy issues are raised and direct the speaker to forward comments regarding individual employees or students to the superintendent. Because we are modeling civil discourse for our community, speakers must present their testimony in a respectful manner. Vulgarity, character attacks, malice, or specific complaints identifying staff or students by name or implication will not be permitted. The board will not deliberate, discuss, or engage in conversation with speakers during open forum. However, the board may ask administration to review the concerns that are presented. And with that, our first speaker is Dave Peters.
Hello, Stillwater School Board. My name's David Peters. I went to Lily Lake Elementary School. I then went to Oakland Junior High, and I graduated Stillwater High School in 1990.
Awesome.
I currently serve as a volunteer in the scouting world. Then I served this area, Stillwater, Woodbury, and some others. I'm here today to talk about Cub Scouts. Cub Scouts is a program that serves kindergarten through 5th grade boys and girls. The Cub Scouts need you to revisit and amend the district policy regarding the paper flyers students can take home from school. We would like the policy change to allow organizations chartered by Congress to paper flyer the students' take-home materials. Superintendents tell us that if we allow the Scouts to paper flower, we have to allow all the other organizations to also. By amending the policy to allow congressionally chartered organizations or organizations chartered by Congress, that line is set. Years ago, when paper flyers were allowed in the district, the Stillwater area was a powerhouse in the scouting arena or area. Back then, each unit had about 10% of the school's boy population participating in the scouting program. Since the current paper flyer policy, the numbers have dropped to below 5%. Digital flyers are showing less than a 1% open rate, or response rate, sorry. That means in an elementary school of 500, that's 5 new scouts a year. That's hardly sustainable. Email is not the preferred communication method for our newest generation of parents of school-age children. Surveys among this demographic report comments like, email's too slow, it's too formal, and there's too much information in it. A couple years ago, BSA National got more in line with the rest of the world's scouting program and allowed girls to be Cub Scouts, and just last year, also to be Boy Scouts. The Cub Scout numbers still remain about 5% of the school populations. That's boys and girls in the program. If we want the highly regarded Eagle Scouts, we need more Cub Scouts. Even if you never been in the program, you probably have some high regard for an Eagle Scout. Eagle Scouts have traditionally come from Cub Scouts, the elementary age program in much the same way that a high school baseball team grows from T-ball programs. I coached my oldest son, I have 3, T-ball through high school and baseball. In the T-ball years, there were 28 teams, each of 12 kids. By the time that my son made the high school baseball team, there were 7 of his grade. Not saying that all of those other kids that left the program didn't get something out of baseball, they did. But it takes a lot of people, a lot of support for those 7 kids to get the playtime and the quality of competition and the learning experiences together to produce that quality high school baseball team and Eagle Scouts. Scouts grow up to be more civic-minded than those who do not join the program. They vote, they run for office, they help with food drives, they coach teams. Volunteering becomes part of their DNA on some never-ending desire to make positive changes in their community. They grow up to be our firefighters, our EMTs, our first responders. One scout I worked with recently, he graduated high school, he'd earned his Eagle and he went in to join the Army. Because he earned his Eagle, he started out a few pay grades higher than those who did not earn Eagle. His dad went to see the graduation ceremony and told me 30% of the enlisted now are females.
Okay, so I'm sorry, your time is up, so I'll just... Is there a final sentence that you could...
Yes. In 2002, President Bush signed the No Child Left Behind Act, and in that act is the Boy Scouts of America Equal Access Act. I'll paraphrase. It states that if schools allow any outside organizations space, they also have to allow the Scouts. Please change the policy to allow congressionally chartered organizations to paperfly the students.
Thank you very much. Thank you. This is helpful. Thank you. Okay, the next speaker we have is Jim Franklin.
Good evening, all. Can you not start the clock right now? I just want to mention that the item I'm speaking to has been removed from the agenda, and I did not know that until I got here. You had asked for comments in December, so I'm going to proceed with it, but I realize it's not on the agenda.
That's just fine. Yes, we'll take that into account.
Good evening, all. Tonight's agenda includes a second reading of Board Conduct Policy 209, in which you are removing 3 protective policies that, in summary, state: 1, individual board members need to have full board approval to speak to the legal counsel regarding superintendent evaluations. 2, other legal matters should be forwarded to the superintendent. 3, any board member contacting legal services without board approval will be held responsible for expenses. All of these policies have been broken by board members this past year. On January 29th, 3 board members met with the district's attorney to provide privately to discuss superintendent evaluations with no intention of letting all board members know. An attorney there recognized that his ethical representation was to the entity of the district, not 3 board members, and so notified admin. As Director Burns has publicly stated, these policies have never been rescinded and are still currently in effect. I have called this to the board's attention 3 times this year for incurring legal expenses without prior full board approval. The practice continues and has never been addressed, except that Liz Weisberg has referenced several times that since nobody follows it, it doesn't matter. Well, you demand adherence to policy from admin to the T. Meanwhile, you knowingly disregard your own policies. Former Chair Potacek, you call out policy and process errors on a regular basis. Why did you and Chair Stivlin choose to ignore the one about your legal expenses or illegal legal expenses? Previous boards have followed these policies for the last 10 years now without issue. It appears that you are doing something that you didn't or don't want the entire board to know about. Now you wish to remove these safeguard policies, the rules you are already breaking, to replace them with one simple statement. The statement is board members will notify the board chair prior to contacting district council. For taxpayer protection, this does not go far enough. There has to be a safeguard to provide all board members with the same information when preventing abuse of legal services, while preventing abuse of legal services. A perfect example of this was at the July 11th board meeting. A surprise resolution for the superintendent separation proposal was introduced by Chair Stivland. To justify this, the board majority were referring to statements from the district lawyer. The rest of the board in its entirety did not have this information and would have no idea if it was factually correct or not. With this change that you are proposing, there are no checks and balances. Looks like the current board certainly needs them, and maybe others will too. I am shocked that the district attorney accommodates you in this manner. She represents the entire district, the entire board, and not singular board members. As a citizen, I think your behavior with the attorney calls into question your purpose in wishing to change this policy. By the way, this issue has cost us approximately $40,000 last year. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next person we have is John Franklin.
Hello, Chair Stivlin, members of the school board. I come to you today not as a disgruntled community member, but as a student in your district. I'm not here to remind you about how high the legal expenses are from this year compared to the years past, or any other fun stuff like that. I'm speaking tonight because of action item B, the secondary literacy curriculum. I feel like the curriculum would have absolutely benefited me in both middle and high school. The part that really hit home for me was the part where students could work in book clubs. In 10th grade, our teacher let us select our next book from this sheet given us, and then we would get put into book clubs with other peers. My group read the book Dead Man Walking, great book by the way. We were then able to work as a team to decipher the theme of the book, helping each other with rough spots along the way. It was way better than having a teacher lecture us for 54 minutes. Our strengths helped each other's weaknesses, and by the end, all of our skills improved greatly. We learned not only how to exercise critical thinking in a real-world situation, but we also learned how to explain and teach our group mates in parts they were struggling with. Another part of the proposed curriculum that definitely would help is the fact that middle school students would read and write daily. Whether this is a simple answer to an open-ended question or writing a full-on CSE about a theme of a passage, this would help tremendously with our vocabulary, comprehension, critical thinking, grammar, and most importantly, writing. Musicians say that to play an instrument every day to get better at it. Artists say to draw something every day to get better at it. According to that logic, shouldn't daily reading make us better at reading and writing every day make us better at writing? One last reason you should vote for this curriculum is because it lets us pick out our own books. In my high school career, I've read numerous books about illegal happenings or graphic imagery that makes most adults uncomfortable, so you can imagine how it must have been in the classroom. I feel like if I got to pick out what books I wanted to read from the list my teacher gave me, I would have understood the learning targets a lot better. I'm sure there are other options for us to learn how to write CSCs through books, or done through books where tragic events occur. In conclusion, students would benefit from the secondary literacy curriculum because we would be able to work in small groups and learn from each other. We would be reading and writing every day to improve numerous skills, including comprehension, critical thinking, and vocabulary. Lastly, we would be able to pick out books that interest us more than the uncomfortable feelings in our stomach when we read about risque or gory content. I may not be around to be a pupil during this curriculum, but for the sake of my fellow peers and grades below me, please vote to adopt the secondary literacy curriculum. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next person to speak is Dee Dee Armstrong.
Dee Dee Armstrong, Afton. Okay, so I totally wasn't prepared for this, but then I looked over at the student survey that you're getting a second reading for. It's under reports, letter A, student surveys, and I still got problems with it. And I still got problems because section 2, items C, D, and E. Item C says the superintendent may choose not to approve any survey that seeks probing personal or sensitive information, but it doesn't say the superintendent may, that she might not. I mean, you might not, I don't know. Could be a good day, could be a bad day. Item D says surveys containing questions pertaining to the student or the student parents or guardians related to practices in sex, family life, morality, and religion will not be administered to any student unless the parent or guardian of the student is notified in writing that such a survey is going to be administered and the parent or guardian of the student gives written permission. So that's good that we want to get the written permission, but on section 4, item C, it says that you have to opt out of any surveys. So there's a discrepancy in, are we opting in because we've been priorly notified, or do we have to opt out? It should just be, parents are allowed to opt their children in. Here's the surveys that we're gonna do. Here's what they're gonna ask. You should just know. And it should just be simple. You can opt in if you think it's pertinent, or if you think that, hey, they're asking questions about where do they live, how tall are they, what's their gender, who do they live with, and when's the last time they smoked or had sex. Maybe that could get traced back to a student. Even though we say it doesn't, anybody who's a little bit internet connected and well-developed sense of curiosity or malicious intent can figure stuff out about kids, and there's enough creeps in the world that let's try not to have it do that. So that's what I gotta say. Let's opt in, not opt out.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Andrea McCready.
I'm Andrea McCready. I live in Stillwater up by the hospital. And I have a message for board members, and I'm commenting on the secondary literacy review process, curriculum review process, and the policy R1.2 curriculum results that was last revised and approved in May 2008, and then the relevant parent and student involvement. The reason I'm talking about this is because this portion of the discussion from the December 12th work session, Board Member Liz Weisberg asked, so we do have a curriculum advisory committee and there are currently community members, parents, students, and this already went through that process. The presenter said yes. And then Board Member Shelley Pearson said, I think it would have been good to know that earlier. I didn't even know that committee still existed. So I think just future work for everybody is we're always asking the question, were there parents involved? Were there students involved? Just to have that at the forefront, like here's how they were involved and what was tweaked because of their suggestions, I think that would be helpful to know. And the presenter said, yeah, because there's fabulous conversation. So Shelley Pearson indicated relief that parents and students were stated to be involved, and that relief now seems to be possibly ill-placed. And Liz Weisberg had tried to confirm who was involved in the review and was only provided the information that, yes, the various positions were involved. So I entered a data request for the documentation underlying the statements of parent and student involvement, and I received some documents from 2 curriculum advisory CAC committee meetings, including the CAC member list and the meeting sign-in sheets. For the curriculum advisory committee list and any similar lists, you'll want to look at role clarifications. There are gaps in the parent involvement on the CAC list that could be handled better, and no students signed into the 2 meetings for which I received documentation. It was unclear what was reviewed and what feedback may have been used from those reviews. I did receive no evidence that student involvement in a review was related, that student involvement was in a review related to my request. Perhaps student advisement and incorporation of their ideas was via some other way than the committee documents I was provided. But it's really a moot point whether community parents and students were involved up to now, because for the existing process, the district plans to bring in students during the years 4 and 5, part of policy R1.2, not now, but about 2 years from now. Years 4 and 5 are the years when actually all of the positions are to be officially brought into a review per the R1.2 policy. For the existing process, input from the various positions officially comes in only after the board would be voting to commit the district to major effort and expense. Because none of the positions are actually officially involved until years 4 and 5, it looks like it's up to the board itself to, at this time, vet the details of what you think those positions may need or want. The information stated in the December 12th meeting did not match up with underlying documentation. Therefore, I advise the board that if there are questions that are key to you, that you dig into actual documentation rather than relying on statements and meetings. And the key words are trust but verify. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is William Raymond.
Hello, before we start the time, I may respectfully request the board to allow me to speak for 4 minutes, if that's possible. If not, it's totally understandable.
We'll give you some flexibility.
All right, thank you. Hello, my name is William Raymond, son of Reed Raymond and Heidi Drobnik. I'm a mixed student, both being white and native. I come from a family where education was the great equalizer. Let me share a story about my parents to you all. Both my parents come from families making less than $15K a year, which surprisingly is my paternal grandfather was 6th-generation college educated. My grandfather was the man who wrote the American Indian Education Act with Ted Kennedy, an act that provided funding to tribes across the nation, which signed into law in 1972. My mother made most out of her education, later going to law school. My mother now owns her own all-Native woman law firm in Woodbury that represents Native people and specifically fights for equal education access for people of color. My dad followed his father's footsteps, fighting hard alongside USMN Rep. Don Frazier to add funding to the Indian Education Act. He testified in front of Congress and was able to obtain funding for schools in general, but more funding for American Indian Education Act. Approximately $150 million of that, and and 15 million of that going to generalized schools like ISD 834. My mom said to me when I was younger that education is the great equalizer and shouldn't be turned into a political football. I share this history to show my intentions and my family's intentions for encouraging me to speak tonight. They're so scared of what happens when education is jeopardized by people's desensitized look at education. To ensure everyone receives the education they deserve, I chose to be student council rep for 3,000 kids at Stillwater High School. I take my elected position really seriously because I know what the power of education can really do for a family. This year I was privileged to be part of the community design team, put together to represent 834 geographically, but also by age, color, and culture. We worked hard for 10 sessions consisting of 3 to 4 hours apiece. Most of you here know the 9th session of the CDT almost unanimously recommended to immediately expand Brookview. The failure to the board to follow through on this was very disappointing for families across 834. It was not just a failure of families, most importantly, it was a failure for ISD children and for the kids aspiring to be something in life. Like my mother said, these kids in Brookview were looking for their great equalizer. Nonetheless, I respected the board chair's position at the time, saying the funding mechanism was the reason why it shouldn't have been approved. But sadly, the vote within the committee at the time was 28-1 to expand Brookview. Nearly 100 members of CDT spend around 30 hours each researching what would be the best for our district. We were led to believe this work and time commitment were respected. Having our work rejected, I asked the district board chair if it was even worth my time to be there that night in the 10th session. If the board doesn't want to go through and support findings and conclusion of the CDT in hopes for the success of the master plan that we put together in the CDT, I personally asked the board chair if she would support the master plan and vote yes for it. She did not respond with a comment to support the plan. She had no comment on it, asking me to repeat or rephrase the question. She said she could not guarantee that it would pass through the school board. In my opinion, she downplayed her political a responsibility to represent the countless hours of work invested by the 100 CDT members. I wanted to share this story for the record to reflect the board's chair position on the CDT and my belief that she's not accurately representing her constituents. I thank you all for listening, and board chair, we are all excited to see you cast your vote, support not only for the youth at 834, but hard work in the conclusion of the community design team. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Our next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. We have item A, the minutes of December 19th. B, the minutes of January 9th business meeting. C, the disbursement register. D, accept gifts and donations. E, human resources personnel report. And F, approval of recommendation regarding level 3 grievance. Do I have a motion? Sorry? Oh. There's a G. Sorry. Retirement, yes, I'm sorry. It's retirement agreement. I have an old copy. Retirement agreement with an employee. Thank you. Do I have a motion to?
I'm going to quickly pull C.
Okay. Any other concerns? All right. Do I have a motion to approve A through G minus C?
So moved.
Second.
Director Pearson and Director Riley seconds. All in favor, raise your right hand and say aye.
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 Nay? All right, thank you. So go ahead, Director Pelletier, with your comments on C.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm looking at page 33 of the disbursements, and I'm just going to do I did a quick analysis, and I spoke with Kristen Holheisel this afternoon. I've been asked about this, so I'm just going to do a very quick recap. 2018, the board incurred legal expenses were a total of, and Kristen, if you could correct me if I have the numbers wrong a little bit, $6,927.89. FOIA requests are part of HR, not part of legal. Board incurred legal expenses. And in 2019, my one question was, is it through the end of November? But that, regardless, that number is $40,084. Is that accurate? Through end of November?
End of November, $40,084 for 2019. For 2018, and they're both reflective of Kennedy and Graven bills.
Okay.
So the 6,900 and whatever number you cited was specific to Kennedy and Graven bills, just like in 2019.
Okay. Thank you. That's it. I'll move to pass the disbursements, item C.
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a second. All in favor of approving item C, raise your right hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Nay? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on, we have the reports. Item A is the second reading of policy number 520. It's the student surveys. As I guess I'm currently still the chair of the policy working group until we get to the action items, I will just kind of present this. We had a first reading back in December of this policy. We did hear from a community member tonight with some concerns. This is officially our second reading of the policy of student surveys. Does anybody have any comments or questions at this time?
Chair, I just
Yes.
would, yeah, thank you. My only comment is if we could take the forum speakers' considerations and come back with recommendations for the next meeting.
I can say that we have had a discussion because we have heard the suggestion that we use an opt-in rather than use an opt-out plan. Unfortunately, that might seem appealing. Unfortunately, we're concerned that we wouldn't have very good participation and the results would not be very good. We have had the conversation, but I certainly think we could consider that again.
Can I ask a question regarding that? With the forms that parents have to fill out in the fall, could we make that a form that parents can choose to opt into all surveys if they want to? Maybe that's something we could discuss with somebody, if there's a way we could do that.
That's an interesting idea.
I would just say you could discuss it. It would be hard to track which families, depending upon how many surveys are in a year. It's probably easier if you were going to do it by survey, so that you know specifically who is and who isn't. But it's probably just a discussion, like you're saying, at the committee level.
Go ahead.
Speaking as a former administrator and in this position, one of the challenges of opting in is chasing down people to get any response for or against. That's why most school districts go into the idea of opting out, because people who are opposed to it. It would seem to me that what you need to do before that, and I suspect that 834 does that, is you notify parents collectively, newsletter, other forms, that a survey is going to be given and what the topics are. And then you put the pressure really on parents to contact you if they're uncomfortable with that. But as a practical matter, when you do it the reverse, it's a huge challenge for school districts to conduct any kind of a survey when you put the pressure to contact parents who just haven't responded. Are you a yes or no?
Director Riley?
Let's wait for Tina there for a second.
I've been practicing.
So I think this year was the first year that I really got an announcement or knowledge of some of the assessments that were happening prior from George Nolan had sent all these out earlier, and that was eye-opening for me. Is there a way that maybe we could adapt into policy that if the assessments are organized early on in the year, that they're distributed or notified, parents are notified at a timely manner? Maybe it's at the beginning of the year. I'm not sure when you have all the dates set up. Is it per calendar year? Do you know where I'm going with that?
Yep, so two different things. One's assessments, one's surveys. This is specific to surveys, not assessments. And so the intent of the statute on that is for us to notify via really any type of notification to parents of what surveys we intend to use during the school year at the different levels. And then in addition to that, as you pointed out, prior to an individual survey coming out, giving families ample time. And the reason for that notification is so that if there are families that want to review what's on the survey before the student takes it, they have ample time to review that, come in, and then opt out if they don't want their student to be subjected to those questions or statements.
Is that usually about 2 weeks, did you say? Or
2 weeks to a month usually has been my understanding of what the practice is building by building.
Okay.
Because not all surveys affect all grades in a given year. And some surveys are only given out every other year, every 2 years, things like that.
Right. Any other questions or comments? Well, this is the second reading. It is scheduled to come back for a third reading at the February 6th meeting, but we certainly can take that off of that schedule and give it some more time for consideration with the policy working group before it comes back for that third reading, because the next time it comes out, it'll be for action. So we don't need any action at this point, so we'll just take that under advisement and once the policy working group gets started up again, we'll take a look at it. Any other comments?
A question I would have that would seem to be relevant is in preparation, not for tonight, but in the future. In a typical year, how many surveys are they? And what is the nature? Maybe even reflecting back on a previous year, what grades, what are students asked, that sort of thing. So are we talking about half a dozen? Are we talking about 3 or 4? Or are we talking a very few number, 1 or 2?
Those are good questions. I think maybe we can take that up in the policy working group just to get a sense of that, get some information and share that back out with the board and the community. I would actually like to know that too, because it's not really clear. So, good question. All right, moving on. Our report item is B, is the second reading of policy number 521, which is the student disability non-discrimination policy. Again, second reading. This came out for first reading in December. We have not had any comments or questions or concerns about this. Does anybody have anything they'd like to say now? All right, hearing none, we'll move on.
Oh, actually, I do.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So I guess when you state disabled students, you could use person first language, which is students with disabilities. I think that it'll humanize them first by using students with instead of first characterizing them as disabled. So when you I think it would just be a small edit, but it would help with
That's funny. I thought we already did that.
Yeah,
in my mind, I thought we already had that.
Yeah, I saw it
You
crossed
see one
out.
right here. Okay.
Yeah. And so I just wanted to comment on that because I did see it crossed out.
Okay.
Then I found another one. It was just the purpose right here, disabled students.
Okay, that's a good catch. It's in the
Thank you
purpose.
very much. I appreciate that. I will make a note of that. Okay. And we moved the next item, so we're moving on to our action item A, which is the school board committee and working group assignments. We could take a few moments to have conversation about that. Otherwise, I would just like to see a motion that we approve the assignments as they are, and then we can have discussion after that.
So moved.
Director Weisberg moves. Do we have a second?
Second.
Director Riley seconds. All right, any discussion? Questions, comments? Hearing none, all in favor?
I just have one, and I recognize that the board chair has kind of a task to assign these roles, and that can be a challenging kind of mix of how you get people in their roles. But I think there maybe was an opportunity here to maybe distribute them a little bit differently, but I do understand the challenge that the board chair has, so I just want to make that point.
I appreciate the concern. I do have to say it is a challenging task to put the right people in the right place and make sure people are as happy as they can be in the positions that we, that we need. And I don't think that it's probably ever going to be perfect. We can't please everybody all the time. But I appreciate people's flexibility and willingness to try something a little different. Director Pelletier?
Yeah, thanks. Can I just get a clarification? Did the position of clerk change, or is it still the same? Or was there a change in position?
Director Potachik will continue to be the clerk.
Okay,
However,
so there
he
was
asked-
no change. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
That's fine.
He will not be serving on policy. That's different than what it's been in the past, and that's perfectly fine. We've made adjustments like that in the past as well on other committees. So, any other comments? All right, all in favor, raise your right hand and say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, unanimous. Thank you very much. Here's to a good year ahead. All right, item B of action items, the secondary literacy curriculum.
Good evening, Board Chair Stivlin, Superintendent Pontrelli, members of the board. At the October 10th board meeting, we brought to you an initial report on the secondary ELA curriculum review proposal. At the November 14th board meeting, we presented a report and requested final approval of the secondary ELA curriculum proposal. The final approval vote failed. On December 6th, you were provided with a 28-page packet containing information regarding the questions and concerns you had on the secondary ELA curriculum proposal. On December 12th, we engaged in a learning session specifically focusing on the secondary curriculum ELA proposal. On January 10th, per board member request, you received the information you requested on the additional projects and purchases the board wanted to add in addition to the original secondary ELA curriculum proposal as was requested on November 14th. I am here tonight to ask for final approval on our secondary ELA curriculum proposal.
I think it might be good just to sort of frame this conversation a little bit with, I think collectively we can say as a board, this has been an interesting journey for us. I think it's been an interesting journey for you and for our community. It certainly hasn't gone as smoothly as maybe we would have liked, but I think the good side of that is that through all the different conversations that we've had and the additional information that we've gained, I think we've learned a lot, and we've identified some areas that we might be able to even enhance the original proposal. So, and in addition to that, I think we've also identified as one of the speakers tonight actually I think referred to is perhaps we need to look at the process of how we go through the curriculum review process. Certainly, we want that to be really strong and clear and involve community voices and have lots of opportunities for the board and for community to weigh in on these things as we go along, so that when the final product does come before the board, we're all completely comfortable with it and aware of all the strengths and aspects of it that are great. So certainly been a learning experience for all of us, I think. Having said that, as I said earlier, I think we have identified some items that would strengthen the plan, the original plan that was presented back in October. And so those three things that the board has gotten some information on. One of those items is to add interventionists, reading interventionists at the middle school level. And we did get some funding numbers for what that would cost. Another one is to approve the entire reading proposal for that has been proposed over the 3-year period to say, let's put that money in place this year and make those new books available to all of our students now. And then the last one is the most expensive item, and it's a lot more controversial and I think a lot more maybe difficult to kind of get our heads around exactly how it should go forward, but there is a professional development called Letters Training that is being recommended by MD dyslexia specialist Amy Schulting and widely respected across the country as far as helping our students learn how to get really strengthen the word skills, the phonics skills. And this is something that is a secondary component because some of our sixth graders do still need that support even in middle school. But it is primarily something that would be an elementary level component. And so it's a little bit confusing because this is a secondary literacy proposal. But I think at least I would like to put it forward for the board to consider that we add some component of letters training, what that schedule looks like and how we lay it out and how teachers are involved when they do it. I mean, there's a lot of questions that still need to be answered, but I would like to at least put that forward as a possibility. So let's just have a little bit of conversation. If there are any further questions for Director Larson, then maybe we can get to a place where we can make a motion. Director Weisberg?
So are we wanting to amend the statement that we approve the secondary English language arts curriculum and say the things that we specifically want to add?
We can, yes, when we get to the motion, we would definitely do that. But I guess I want to respect that the board, we really have not had a conversation about adding these three components. We've had some emails of information back and forth. Some people, have kind of felt a little bit out of the loop. And so I've had at least 2 board members ask for further conversation. And while I don't want it to get too lengthy, I do think we can have a little bit of conversation right now about whether or not these are things we want to add to the proposal.
Yep.
Director Pelletier?
Yeah, so you started by saying we, as you were initiating this, so I guess my first question is who is the we in that? And given that this board cares quite a bit about having our various committees part of this decision-making process, when was the CAC informed in this? I mean, I found out about it 2 days ago, so I'm just have those 2 questions. Who is the we, and when was the CAC involved in this?
The CAC has not been involved in this as far as I know. It was a question that was proposed to administration directly by me and by then Chair Potacek.
So the we is you and Chair Potacek?
I proposed it to Chair Potacek. He put it forward to administration as a question. So.
And it came out January 10th at the end of the superintendent report. It was a PDF.
And I actually addressed it in our workshop publicly.
Director Pearson?
So I just need a little clarity on what's not in the budget, I think that board members are looking at.
Yes.
And because I think there are some things that the board might want to push ahead that are already included in year 2. Mm-hmm. And so I need to know what are those things, and I'm going to need to know the total dollar amount above what is budgeted. And I don't have a good understanding around that.
Mm-hmm. Would you like me to answer?
Can you?
That would be great.
So when we originally brought the proposal to you on October 10th, not for final approval, we informed you that the entire package, were you to vote on it, would be $500,000. $502,000 to be exact. But because of the budget reduction in PD, we were going to ask at that time for only 1 year because that's what we can afford in this budget cycle, FY20. And that total amount would be $160,000. And so if you were to approve the 1 year, that would be $160,000. If you were to approve the entire proposal as was asked originally, that would be the $500,000.
And is that budgeted in next year's budget?
No.
So I think maybe, the total package being the $502,000, to answer the question of what's budgeted for, if I understand the question, the way in our mind then we had it set up was it would be roughly the 160 to 170 a year over 3 years, because that's what we could manage in the budget. So it's the 500,000. The real question, I think, is either at the time is either do you do it all in one lump sum, not that it would all be done in 1 year, but you'd approve the whole thing at the 500, or would we want to bite off as much as we could that was in the budget for the 3 years in a row? So anything over the 160 to 170,000 over the 3 years, to answer your question, would not be in what we would be planning in a budget.
Okay.
Does that help?
It does. Can I ask a clarifying question? So 160,000 is in next year's, this year's budget.
And we could budget for it for the next 2 years.
Right. So we could only approve year 1 and then hit year 2, or we could approve the whole package and that would be over 3 years and we would budget for that as we go. So that amount would not dip into the fund balance. It would be whatever we add in addition.
That's correct.
With the letters, training, the interventionists, and the books. None of that is in the budget at all going forward, correct? Thank you.
Two questions I have. One, in answer to Jennifer's question on the curriculum committee, does this, and I'm talking about CAC, is that the review group?
The CAC, Curriculum Advisory Council, Curriculum Advisory Committee, whichever.
But curriculum adoptions, do they typically go to that committee?
They do.
Oh, okay. All right. That's a little different than what I've been used to in the past.
They haven't always. We checked back
Yeah,
on the
that's what I
history,
thought.
and it's messy since 2008 with all the changes in administration. And when we stepped in 2015, 16, there wasn't a cycle in place. There wasn't a process that had been truly followed with all respect. And so we were trying to put the pieces back together and figure out, especially when the world's best workforce changed into one committee, how do we adapt and what's the structure? And that's where having the policy conversation is going to be fabulous, so we all know.
See, and I was confused because prior I had been on that committee.
No, you have. We served together.
As a board representative, and I think particularly what we dealt with were like course additions and course deletions and some other topics, but I don't ever remember curriculum adoption itself coming up as a topic. So that's my confusion, and I'm saying I may have confused that as chair. The question I have is this. One, I'm glad Shelley asked that question, but I think also what's in a lot of the materials we have here, and there's a lot of items that have been added, and 3 of those are the letters training. I think a second one is 2 middle school interventionists, and then I think the third one was some additional reading materials. Now, I'm not opposed to any of those 3, but they have some big costs that are associated with those. So kind of add an addendum to what Shelley asked earlier. I felt and I supported the first reading of the curriculum adoption for reading, secondary literacy. I like the addition of those other 3. What I'm very frightened about, not certain about, is the financial impact on the budget and what happens down the line. So though I support it, I don't know if I support it at this time. I'm sort of like, because I think it's a huge chunk of money for those 3 items. But I think they're a good idea. I'm just saying, I don't think necessarily tonight they have to be part of this package.
Director Riley?
Yeah.
Oh, thanks.
I would like to see something part of this package in moving forward, some kind of commitment. Have we looked into, or you looked into, anything with what it would cost here in Minnesota to become a facilitator, to reduce training costs? And I know they do this all over the state, where you could get, if you score 90% or better on your unit test, you can train to become the facilitator, and then you could train the rest of your staff in that. We looked into any of those?
Yes.
Discount?
Yes, thank you for asking that. If you look at the handout that was provided to you on January 10th, and you see the table with the letters cost projections, if you look to the 3rd or 4th column over, where it says interventionists and instructional coaches, that would be that plan. So we would want, because this is such specific, explicit instruction, helping with phonics and readers with some lagging skills, we would really like to start with interventionists. But then we'd like to have instructional coaches and also Karen Lateral so that we can do the train-the-trainer model. That would reduce costs and give us more flexibility with the scheduling as we would put together an implementation plan for the next so many years.
So we're looking at 96,000.
That would be, over 1 year would be 96,000, correct? But it takes 2 years to do the training because it requires 16 days commitment for a staff member. And so we wouldn't do 16 days in 1 calendar year. So then the cost would be associated per calendar year.
Okay.
Can I just ask a follow-up?
Sure,
I'm so sorry.
sure.
Just a quick follow-up, Chair.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
And so for the 96,143, you're saying that the interventionists and instructional coaches would go through the letters training and then be able to train the staff at hopefully a much reduced cost?
Yes.
Correct?
Yep.
Thank you.
We did not put the cost together for what that would look like internally, but it would be reduced. We would
Right.
not be paying the trainer fees and, yes.
Director Burns?
Thank you. So I think to piggyback a bit on Director Potacic's comments as well as Director Pearson, when I look at this, I see an opportunity here for the board and administration to work together and create some adjunctive opportunities to our overall curriculum. The concern that I have with trying to address that right now is that we haven't had a chance to go through some of these opportunities. There may even be other opportunities and other tools. We haven't had a chance to really deeply explore and discuss them. I suspect that many of us on the board feel like some of these tools would be beneficial, and we could look at how they impact the budget, and I suspected we maybe would support them. But I'm concerned about tonight because I have many, many questions about letters training. What is it? What does it involve? Do we need to do K through 5? Can we start with K through 2? Reading interventionalists. I'd like to see elementary interventionalists, both reading and math. New reading materials, that's the existing one for the secondary curriculum. But I think there are many points that we can be discussing about. Are there changes or additive tools that we can consider for our elementary curriculum? But we need to discuss that. We need to have a rich discussion, asking questions of administration, researching, finding out what makes sense, how does it fit in our overall budget, because we have many, many demands in our budget, and how do we balance it so we get the most impact for our dollar. So from my perspective, there are some interesting ideas that are here, but I view them at this point as just that, interesting ideas that I would like to explore, but not act on tonight.
Director Weisberg?
And I agree with almost everything that you said. That's why I was surprised to see this item come back again, and we didn't even have the additions originally listed in the board packet. So I am hesitant to approve it and say, and then I want us to add this later. I don't want to do it halfway. I would rather table it and have the whole discussion, because that's what I was hoping we were going to be able to do prior to this meeting, and do it all at once. I don't want to do half of it and say, oh yeah, we'll address that later, and then it doesn't happen. That's what worries me, because I think these things are very important.
One addition, and Mark, again, I agree almost with everything you said. I think where they're talking about interventionists, reading interventionists, what's changed is one for each of the middle schools. And elementary-wise, we already have reading interventionists and we have math interventionists.
But I'd like more. I'd like to.
Well, true. But even what's proposed for the middle school is pretty minimal here. It's It's one in each of those, and that's a huge area to cover.
Yes, thank you for that. I'll just say really quickly too, in response to that was directly in response to the working session that we had, where we had conversation about what would help at the middle school level. And the teacher that was talking with us said, interventionists would be really helpful. I said, what if you have a student that comes to your class that is behind grade level? Because they're not all at grade level when they show up in 6th grade, 7th grade. What happens? And they just have to make do as best as they can and make accommodations with a large class size and, a wide range of abilities. That's challenging. So if we can provide that extra support in 6th grade and 7th grade, we can really boost the learning for those students and maybe take some of that pressure off of the teachers for having to try to make all of that happen on their own. And we do have reading interventionists at the middle school, at the elementary level already. So that was something that came out as a red flag for me, is that we don't have interventionists for reading or math at the middle school level, and we really do kind of need to do that. So.
Yeah, which I appreciate the conversation. I think part of why the additional things were brought was to try to get fuller board support. And so I think it's this balance of, I want to have it as part of the budget conversation too. What's it going to take to get this ELA passed? And then what are the next steps from there? I think that's part of why, if we're going to get stuck in, it's going to be a not pass again, then are there things that would help it to get passed?
And thank you. And I'll just respond to both of those comments just briefly too. The proposal is suggesting that we invest in teachers' college units of study reading and writing. We're already using that at the elementary level, and this would be an expansion of that at the middle school level. And then it's a workshop model, so if I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, it's a workshop model we would create in middle school, which is really wonderful. As the speaker tonight said, it allows kids to have a lot more choice and flexibility, and it does sound really appealing to me too. And that the same model would be implemented at the high school level, only with instead of using these other materials, we'd be using a textbook, but it would be a workshop model. So that's all appealing to me. I think the big concern is that, let's be frank, our MCA reading scores aren't great. And I think we need to be serious about what are we going to do to improve those for our students. And one of the big opportunities for me is are we making sure we're covering phonics? And if we aren't getting our kids really solid with phonics at the elementary level, then that's just going to continue to be a problem as they go through their grades. And this teachers' college units of study reading and writing is coming under fire nationwide because it doesn't have phonics. So for me, that's a big piece that we need to make sure we're covering. And that's just a question. That was the main reason why I didn't vote for this plan last time. I wanted to make sure we have phonics covered. And so I just think it's really important. What's more important than making sure all of our kids can read?
To clarify, the Letterland program in K1 is the phonics program that we implemented through the elementary. And then we have the Words Their Way program that helps with those skills too if they're needed in phonics as the kids get into the intermediate grade levels. And we're still looking at word study programs at the middle level. So you would have information and feedback on that, which would really help those struggling readers who, if there are a few that haven't developed some of those phonic basic skills, we could add that.
And the writing component is being added this year, right? Because that was cut due to budget cuts last year, but it's in there for this year. Is that correct?
Yes. Yep. This year being, we will be able to offer. Next, starting in July, we'll offer the writing professional development.
Okay.
To finish out the grades 3-5 at the elementary.
Okay.
And then we'll be with that cycle.
Director Pearson?
Thank you. So I'm going to ask that clarifying question. Is this reading and writing? Is it both?
Yes.
Because it was the elementary that was in my head that we hadn't adopted the writing.
Yeah, when you voted for the elementary proposal, it did include the full writing package. We just couldn't implement this year because of the budget, but it's still going to happen. Same with middle school. The writing is still a significant component.
Okay. Any other comments, questions, concerns? Director Pelletier?
I just have a question. So Words Their Way we've had that for 2 years, is that right? This is the second year that we've had it?
And then some started 2.5 years ago. Okay, and then what did we have prior to Words Their Way?
I don't know if we had.
Did we have we had any curriculum at all?
Did we have a Words Their Way?
So at the last curriculum adoption, I believe it was around 2000, well, it was shortly after 2010. It was before I came on board in 2013. The board adopted HMH Journeys. It's a textbook. And if you're familiar with textbooks, those types of things it's kind of everything's crammed in there. So it was in the textbook.
So we did not then have a separate program for that.
Okay, thank you. Did you have another question?
No, just, so, I mean, that's amazing to me. We really haven't had an established curriculum for almost a decade.
That's why we selected as a learning and innovation department when we came in and assessed the needs. It was very clear, PK-12 literacy, ELA was our first priority to just reestablish because we started seeing the MCA gaps, and we knew we had incredible teachers doing incredible things in the classroom, but we needed to help with the resources they needed to be able to reach students. So that's why this is a PK-12 proposal that we've prioritized the last 3 years.
Thank you.
I'd like to just say a little bit more about the letters training, that it is not a curriculum, it's a professional development, and teachers go through the program. And I don't know how much you board members have been able to study the breakout. Rachel's done a great job of dividing it all kinds of different ways and cutting it down. So to answer your question, Director Burns, we could potentially just do kindergarten, first grade, second grade, or something like that. We could just do the first 4 modules. I think there are 8 modules altogether. There are ways to break it down so that the cost isn't so high. If we were going to do K through 5, all 8 modules, I think it was over $1 million or something like that. Well, we couldn't even do all of that in 1 year anyway. So there are ways for us to cut down on those costs. It's a very highly regarded professional development, and a lot of other districts in the state are already doing it. Robbinsdale comes to mind, is already implementing this now.
Could I ask, so I guess where I'm confused in many things is we're talking about a secondary curriculum tonight, and yet we keep talking about elementary curriculum. So I feel that we're completely gone far past what the intent is of this actual motion. And I don't feel comfortable in any way, shape, or form blending this. It's I appreciate the conversation. I've said many times, I sincerely loathe incomplete projects, and I see this in a way as we're not there yet. At the same time, this letters is, it's $1 million. So I mean, that is just absolutely not in my realm of, I would not support that. I do support further and future conversations about it. However, to throw that in there, I just simply do not support that at all.
I think that's a fair point. I completely can understand that. It doesn't seem to be logical. We are talking about secondary literacy. However, if our students aren't getting strong foundation in phonics when they're in elementary school, they will struggle when they're in middle school and high school. So it kind of all builds on itself. Director Weisberg?
And I was just trying to clarify the $1 million, and I wish everybody else had access to what we're looking at. But the $1 million option would be if we train everyone all at the same time. So I think the option that Rachel was just talking about was $96,000 if we had the interventionists and instructional coaches complete it first, and then we're able to train staff from there to be a much more.
Director Riley?
In that, if I go off of that comment, that doesn't limit you to the elementary schools in itself, and it also is very beneficial to our English learner supports, having that ability to teach those skills while they are learning the language.
Director Patrick?
Here, okay, I'm trying to summarize a little bit because of where we're at. I think the first part you started off with very helpful, in that originally you'd like to see $502,000. And scaling that so that it could be absorbed had cut back to $160,000 for the first year. So that's one proposal. That's the proposal we voted on at an earlier meeting, and basically we had a 3-3 tie. Okay, now since then, and that's what's out there tonight, there's been an addition for 3 additional items. If I'm looking at this packet, and help me out, whether it's Kristen or Bob or Rachel or maybe all 3, if I'm looking at what the additional cost would be for the other stuff, and maybe it's not real clear, because I look at, there are price tags on page 1, 2, 3, 4, actually pages 1 through 8. So if I add those, how much are we talking about? And what's been mentioned is $1 million for letters, and I'm saying, can you tell us the extremes here, starting off with $500,000, which could be 160. Okay, if we add all the other pieces, what are we talking about, or where am I going to find them in the packet?
Page 2.
Okay.
So the back side of the first page, the bottom half, are the additional requests as were requested by you.
Okay, so it's page 2 in the packet, which is
Back,
confusing.
yep.
And it's on the top, original budget proposal.
No, so actually, I'm sorry. Page 2 to me is the back side of page 1.
Yeah, I think it has a 1.
Yeah, it actually does have 1 on it.
That one.
Okay, that's it.
Yep.
Okay.
So the bottom half of that. So the first row, that 142,000, our first ask, if we were to give input, would be to just fully fund the classroom books with the proposal.
An additional 142,000.
Yes.
Okay.
But if you look at the next item down, that would be the request for middle school books.
Books.
Yep. Then the high school, more books for 30,000, and then more leveled books and resources for elementary classroom libraries.
And that whole total is $387,000, and that's all books?
Yes. Yep, that's the materials part of it. The letters would determine upon where you land.
I thought we had 144 on the original plan.
Yep.
Can I ask a clarifying? So that doesn't make the full plan 887, right? Because some of that is just bumping sooner.
Yep.
So is it just the first box that is bumping sooner and the rest is additional? So we're looking at 740,000 for price tag instead of, and
Correct.
that's with, and are those the things that administration is recommending would be the most helpful, or where's that coming from?
We always appreciate any support the board were to offer, but with our budget, I can't answer that because I don't control the funds for that. But if you were to prioritize, the first ask we'd have is to fully fund the secondary proposal, the original proposal.
And I thought what I heard tonight was this, 2 positions that were different. One position was go with the additional request. And then the other was, I want to vote on a total package. Is that what we're talking about? Is that where we are?
I think so.
Could I, Chair, could I just quick get a clarification on so fully fund the secondary is 387. What is the 2 interventionists I think I might be missing a page here. What is it? What's the amount for the 2 interventionists?
The 387 was
is
just
included in that?
No.
No, that was just for.
What is that? It'd be 214 for 2 interventionists.
Okay. All right, thanks.
And that's so that would be your 1. The 214 carried through for interventionists would carry through. And then there would still be a cost, but less in years 2 and 3.
So you're talking 3 different things. Interventionists would be a staffing, that'd be an annual commitment to the
Right.
budget. The letters would be scaffolded, depending upon the way you want it, but the curricular materials as laid out in what I just described on the back of the page, that's a one-time investment.
And that's the 387 you're talking about?
Correct.
Okay.
Does that help?
And so when you asked what would our recommend, if we were going to recommend that, correct me if I'm, here's where we would go is we would first be recommending the curriculum purchase and the professional development to go along with the curriculum purchase. That to me is the first, that's the curriculum adoption.
The original package.
The original package. That would be, and so inclusive of what Rachel shared as the extra curriculum materials. I think, Sarah, you were the one that brought that up first, the extra books and things like that. So all of that together, if you were to ask us, well, what would we prioritize? It would be all of the curriculum and the professional development to go along with the curriculum would be the first piece. And then in addition to that is a decision about to what degree would we do, if at all, letters training, either by grade level or by train the trainer or that. So that's a second one. And then the third piece is, are we wanting to allocate dollars towards sustaining interventionists at the two middle schools? So those are really those would be the three priorities. Our priority, though, of the three would be to complete the curriculum purchasing and the professional development that goes along with the curriculum purchasing.
Go ahead, Director Pearson.
Can I ask if those who voted against it last time are willing to share? What's your greatest concern? And I think maybe what would you be willing, what would help you pass it now if we were certain we would have this as part of our budget conversations coming up? If anybody is willing to talk about it.
Director Weisberg?
I would like to see some form of letters training in our district. I think MDE reached out to us when they first started it. They had a group that was, they wanted us to be part of their initial group. I don't think we were able to do it in time, but I think they had space for like 4 or 5 teachers to be part of the group because it has been super successful in other states that have implemented the training. I would love to see some part of it, and I hate to approve it the way it is tonight and say, oh, we'll get to it, and then we don't get to it. And that scares me. I definitely want to have the interventionists at the middle school level. I think we even heard in the last session that we are supposed to have interventionists at the middle school level, and we don't. So to me, that's a non-negotiable. And I would like for the books. I'd like for us to be able to buy the books. And I believe that when we talked about the budget, the final budget, that we have some room. And I'm kind of surprised, I guess, that some people are not in favor of the professional development, because I had heard board members before say that they were upset that we cut professional development. So this would basically be adding it back.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else?
Yeah, a question I would have, and Kristen, how much do we have to spend?
Oh my gosh.
No.
We need to get out of
That's
here at a
huge.
decent hour, so.
I was going to say, well,
I mean,
that is
it's
a
one thing to
loaded
want.
question, because honestly,
Kristen,
that's.
you do not have to answer that question.
Can I just, with the curriculum piece only, it may not be as much that you're allocating additional as you think, because if you follow the trajectory that we were on at the 160 at 170,000 a year, right? So if you play that out over 3 years that we have currently in our budget, you're at $480,000 of the total bill. What Rachel just shared with the additional curriculum pieces, it brings our grand total up around 735, 750. So if you take 750 minus the 480, which so what are you at?
250.
Roughly $270,000 extra that we wouldn't have in the budget over the next 3 years is the way to think about the curriculum piece if we implement over 3 years.
That would be one-time funds. That does not include the interventionist.
That does not, that's what I'm saying, it's just the curriculum piece,
Or letters training.
or the letters training.
Letters and
That's
books.
just that
the start
curriculum piece.
of a letters with the interventionist and special ed.
And I would just clarify, just technically, we have to have interventions at the middle level. We don't have to have interventionists per se. I'm not saying that
Right.
you can. It would be much easier to do interventions with interventionists, but you have to have interventions.
I'm hoping with the letters training, we don't need that many more interventions.
That's why I'm bringing it up as a technicality. If you're training, you have to have interventions in place.
Yeah. Right, thank you. for
Just
that
to add, thank you for saying that. So they, I think, currently do it during their pony time.
Somewhat, yeah.
They
They try.
configure it a way that, like, my son wants to be an intervention because he likes it better than.
He can get his homework done.
I guess my only point was, while interventionists are great, you can also program and you can spend money on programming or training or whatever to get to the same end. It doesn't have to just be interventionists to do that.
Thank you.
Can I ask another question?
Yes, go
So
ahead.
just to clarify that I'm hearing what you say, so if we were to do the original plan plus these additions, plus the 96,000 for the letters training for interventionists, we're at about $360,000 more than what was originally budgeted over 3 years. Is that correct?
Over the 502,000, yes.
Right, okay, thank you.
You've taken 502 and made it 850-ish.
But over 3 years.
Over 3 years.
If we go over, so that'll be the second thing so now that gets us back to the original question of the original proposal. Do you want to allocate it all at once, big chunk, which means you got to, back to the question to Kristen is, because it's going to have to come out of the general fund or some surplus someplace else, because in this year, I only have 160,000 budgeted for this thing. Or do you want to take it out over 2 years and do 2 one-time additions, which you could plan for that as well. We would then still plan to allocate the 160 that we have per year towards that and not spend it on something else.
Thank you. And did you have something? Oh, I'll just say really quick. Okay. So in order to honor the question that Director Potacek asked, basically how much money is in the budget, do we have the money in the budget to support the addition of, approximately 200,000? I mean, just with the caveat that I don't think there's anything more important that we could spend our money on than teaching our kids to read.
You don't have the money built into the current budget. That said, you have a fund balance that is greater than the 5% board-approved policy of which you could use.
Thank you. Thank you. Director
Just,
Burns?
yeah, thank you. Am I correct? I think I remember the discussion that if this were adopted, the original proposal, there would be textbooks for the 11th graders, correct? Mm-hmm. And I thought that there was going to be, in a way, we've already had some testing, if you will, in small sections, but now it would be across the entire 11th grade. And there would be some feedback, I think. And it may be to our benefit to consider the approach, the staggered approach that admin has proposed, so that we get that feedback, and if for whatever reason the feedback isn't what we expect, we haven't invested the money all up front.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Go ahead.
So to that point, if for those that were on the board at the time or watching, if you remember back to the way that we went about elementary literacy adoption, essentially what happened was the board approved a sandbox number of, I don't remember what it was. And then we took that and figured out how best we could roll it out over time. It didn't all get allocated at once. That's essentially, I think to your point, that's what we ended up doing with elementary curriculum is we piloted it first year in one full building, got that training going, and then built it out the next year to everybody else and had worked out things like we knew certain rooms needed extra books and things like that. So we're really, if you peel back all the layers with the curricular adoption, we're really just asking for you to put the sandbox around the curriculum, if you're okay with the curriculum, of what is the total dollars we have to spend so that we can figure out how we can best roll it out, because we still have to make decisions about who can get trained on what and when and how, and that might go across 1 year and 2 years, what happens then is when you allocate that, that's when we say, well, we didn't spend $250,000, and that's where we share that with Kristen, and she rolls that into curriculum the following year, and we know that it's earmarked for this project.
Yeah, what I would say is this, and I've mentioned it before, I approved the original curriculum adoption. I think what we've heard from other board members is they wanted some specific additions to that. Like, I'm not sure, and that's why we're having this discussion, I'm not sure this meets the criteria that Director Weisberg set down of what she wanted to be convinced to vote for the package.
May I offer?
Yes.
Absolutely.
So if we were to take the staggered approach, as Director Burns suggested, and you approved the ask for this year, which is about the 160,000, we can cover that in our budget. Then the decision you'd have to make is, do you want to invest the 96,000 in letters, and do you want to add any books? I think that simplifies it for this year. And then we can look at next year as next year approaches, or you can have the intervention staffing as part of a larger staffing conversation.
Director Pearson?
Can I just ask, because I would be more inclined to do the 3-year, can we still reassess even if we approve the 3-year? And if it's like a train wreck and you hate it, we can say we're going to go in a different direction.
Absolutely, because with the $50,000 threshold and minimum of bringing it to you, you'll see it anyway as purchases. So when you're reflecting on just that HMH, the high school investment, with starting with grade 11, that will be part of the process. And we would bring that adjustment to you if we discovered that was not the route and the teachers suggested otherwise.
Okay.
I just had a follow-up. So, I'm sorry, Rach, you said that the 96,000, I thought that included phasing in interventionists at the middle school. Is that that's just talking about
Just
the
letters.
current interventionists that we have and instructional coaches would have letters training?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So then the interventionist salary is where?
It's in the middle of that page 1.
Okay.
See that?
We would plan on our average of 107,000 per.
214.
So if we did 96,000 and then 200,000 for interventionists, and the phasing in, we're talking about 160 plus 96 plus 200, and then whichever portion of the 387,000 additional books, is that the total we're talking about?
Correct. I apologize, though I misspoke. The letters is 89, not 96.
And that's for instructional coaches and interventionists to get that training.
Yep.
And hopefully with the idea that eventually we'd have a train-the-trainer system in place. That would be great.
That sounds like a deal.
But can I just ask a quick question too? The 3-year plan, which is 502,000, includes classroom books, novels, and materials of a total amount of 144,000. So when I was thinking about saying, let's do the books, I was thinking if we only do 1 year, proposal, we approve 1 year, but then we say, okay, but we're gonna do all of the books for the whole 3 year. You've got 144 in here, but to do 1 year, it was 72.
Yep.
So that's what I was thinking about that. But then this other one is way more than that, so I'm not sure.
Oh, I thought you, okay.
You see what I'm saying?
Yep. So to that, we would be very happy if you would just match the 3-year total of the 144 and approve that this year, which would mean the books would only then be a $72,000 increase for this year.
That's what I was thinking, yes.
That you would need to cover.
Yes.
Okay, 2 questions then. So does that decrease one of these numbers, or is that separate? That 72,000.
Yeah, I'm just talking, instead of this number, it would be 144.
Okay, and then the second thing, I need you to clarify for me the training for the interventionist, because What I see for 89,000 is additional teacher pay to complete independent study work.
Yes.
So what's the total?
Thank you. It is, I apologize, we're working off a few pages. It is,
It's
as
very
I stated
complicated.
first, 96,000.
Say it again.
96,000. So what we're at right now is we'd be looking at the 160,000 for the 1 year. Then it would be an additional 72,000 to finish out the books, as Chair Stivlin suggested. And then it would be the 96,000 for letters PD start.
And then if we did interventionist, that would be 214.
Yep.
And that would be ongoing.
Correct.
So, I'm sorry, the page I'm looking at has 192,000 for letters training for interventionist instructional coaches.
Over 2 years.
Okay, that's
for
where,
the whole
so
8 modules.
96,000 is half of that.
Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
because you just do the 4 modules and then.
So, okay.
Yeah.
So are we at a place where, sorry.
Actually, I was going to make an attempt.
Go for it.
Okay. I had one quick question. Rachel, from a staff perspective, what is your opinion about letters training?
The interventionists would greatly appreciate this professional development because it would be a complement to Orton Gillingham. I couldn't answer the question for all staff because I think one of the things we need to work out is the negotiation with the SCEA on how we would go about this, because it does require 16 days over 2 years. So what would that look like contractually to be out of the classroom? And or if we would require it over the summer, would that require an MOU or a contractual agreement to require that over the summer? It is a significant time investment as well.
Is that cost built in here?
Yes.
That's part of the reason why it's so expensive when you look at the total
The
thing.
sub-cost
The
or the
K-5.
summer pay?
Yep, the summer pay, right.
All right,
Before you make your motion, can I just, so the one thing, so systemically, what we've tried to do with all of our adoption stuff over the last 5 years is not get ourselves into a spot where we agree to do something administratively and not commit to it over years. Because that's what we heard when we first came into Stillwater. We heard from staff. We commit the first year, and then the money's not there the second year, and so we have these fits and starts. What concerns me is the direction we're going with this, because it sets us up for potentially being in a position where we implement for a year, but then we're left back into this conversation a year from now, and where does that leave us? It makes me nervous not to at least, even if we came back a year from now and said, you know what, we're going to go in a different direction because of whatever, get that? It makes me nervous not making the decision to allocate the total right now, and even if it gets put into a line item that we hold on to, but we've at least agreed that we're moving forward with the curriculum or we're not, because otherwise it's hard for us to plan, and it's hard for us to have people commit to a professional development that they don't know is going to be sustained.
So you're saying your preference would be to approve the 3-year plan and not just a 1-year plan?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right,
The 502?
Yes, but I go back to the original. Our recommendation would be that whatever you do with the additional stuff is your prerogative, right, in terms of adding on, if that's what you need, if that's what you're, with the letters or whatever. But from our perspective, our recommendation is you would approve the curriculum package as the package, whether it's delivered in 1 year or 3 years. But the package is approved.
I'm just going to make an attempt here.
Yep, let's do it.
Okay, so I'm going to move that we adopt the secondary English language arts proposal for a tune of 502 staggered over the course of 3 years. And again, I'm just making an attempt to move the needle.
We need a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Director Burns, second. Further discussion?
well, so this is a time when we could make an amendment, right?
We could make an amendment, yes.
So if I could, I'd like to amend that we also approve the $96,000 for letter training for interventionists.
Okay, do we have a second for an amendment to approve the $96,000 for letters training for interventionists and instructional coaches, I think it would be modules 1 through 4, correct? Yes. Director Weisberg? Would you second that?
Could I amend that amendment to add the interventionist?
You have to second
at
it
the middle
first.
school?
If it
Okay,
gets-
second.
Okay.
Second, sorry.
Okay, Director Weisberg seconds.
Then she could amend.
And then I would like to amend it to say that we have the PD for letters and interventionists at the middle school.
So what you're
96,000.
saying?
She's adding interventionists
You're
on
adding
top.
interventionists,
Yeah.
okay?
What's the dollar amount total?
214,000.
Per year.
Yep.
Forever.
I feel like I'm in a conference.
I can't support that. I can't.
Well,
I
so she
don't.
just needs a second.
Okay, so do we have a second?
on
Let me
that.
just clear, you guys, this is my first night.
You'll get it. We'll help you through it. You'll get it.
Oh my gosh.
So right now,
Okay.
does Director Weisberg have a second?
Do we have a second for the amendment to the amendment, which would mean we would be including interventionists at the middle school, professional development, for letters, professional development for our instructional coaches and interventionists at the elementary level? Do we have a second for,
I'll
okay?
second.
Director Potacek seconds the amendment to the amendment. Do we have any conversation about the amendment to the amendment?
Yeah.
Has to stay with that.
Question.
Director Potacek.
And again, Kristen, we got a lot that's been stacked up here. And so as we work our way down, budget-wise, how does this, you mentioned the
Just
fund
nod and
balance.
smile.
No, and my point is
Can
just.
I use this as my first night?
No, but my point is, I think what we've expressed here, both by the motion and the additions, is what we want to do. I'm concerned also, can we do it?
Which I think we're at 315,000 above what's budgeted right now.
And frankly, I think we can do that, but also I want to say there has been a multiple board member interest in having further conversation about budget and budget development as we go forward in the spring. And again, I would prioritize reading instruction over almost everything else. Go ahead, Director Burns.
So my concern is that this is exactly what I was concerned about. You know,
Me too.
We don't know what impact this has on our budget. We don't, I mean, we know a dollar figure kind of, but we need to, I really believe, before we start to commit to a big program, we need to talk about how is this going to impact our budget. So I feel like we really need to have clarity about what this is on our budget.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay, thank you for that, Director Pearson.
And to that point, I think at this time, as much as I believe in interventionists, that's where I would draw the line before that, because I think that's a bigger conversation of, is that the best way or is there a better way?
Well, and one thing I'd like you to consider to lend itself to future budget conversations, because instantly I start to compartmentalize and I look and say, okay, to the best of my knowledge, and I am not anywhere near the curriculum side of the house, the $96,000 essentially is one-time money. It might come out in 3 years, but it's a one-time investment and it goes away. If you're going to be using fund balance, those are the ways you want to. You don't necessarily want them to be ongoing expenses. When you look at the intervention, and if it's an interventional list, not what Dr. McDowell was talking about, where there's methods to provide intervention. If I'm assuming people, that $200,000 would be an ongoing cost that is currently nowhere in our budget, which would impact future budget conversations and how to handle it, without question.
Okay, thank you.
So the first amendment was the 502 plus the 96 for the one-time 96.
But is that a one-time? That was my question.
Yep.
Or was that for 2 years? That was one time, okay.
That's a one-time. Director Riley.
However much I would love to have more interventionists, I am also concerned about adding that as a yearly increase. And my hope is that with the letters PD, that will be beneficial and kind of cover.
So could I withdraw my amendment and go back to Shelley's in the interest of moving on and getting something passed?
Yes, you can.
I'll withdraw it.
Yeah, and I can take my second one.
Thank you, Mike.
Can't believe you seconded it.
Do we have to vote on that then?
Vote on Shelley's.
She
withdrew
If you
hers.
withdraw, we don't need to vote then
Right.
on it. Okay. But before we go further, I would just like to say, I think the conversation has made it clear that we are interested in providing more support at the middle school level in the way of interventionists. So when we go through and have those budget conversations going forward this spring, let's bring this up again as something we might consider at a later date. Fair? Okay. So now we're back to, we have a motion on the table to adopt the literacy proposal with the addition of letters training for our interventionists and instructional coaches.
And it was seconded.
And so that motion with the amendment has been seconded. Any further discussion about the motion with the amendment?
So my concern with the amendment is that if we haven't yet committed to having letters training for the teachers, is this going to be enough? Is the interventionist and instructional coach training, is that going to get us to where we want to be? And so I feel like if we're going to have the discussion about letters training, interventionists, I want to have a wholesale discussion about the whole thing, rather than saying, well, we'll go with this because it isn't too much money, but at the same time, it is.
I'll respond to that. I agree with you. I think we do need to continue to have budget conversations. I do think that $96,000 is not going to be a huge hurdle for us to overcome, and it gets the ball rolling. At least we get some people, some of the training, we can start having the conversations, we can see what people think of it, and then we can go from there. If the feedback is, it's okay, or if the feedback is like, this was amazing and everyone should have it, well, that's going to help guide that further conversation. I agree with you. It's not enough. In my opinion, it's not enough, but I'm happy with just getting it started.
Okay. So I think what you're saying is you would go for the original proposal plus books, because that's how you got to the 502.
Nope, the 502 is the original
That's the
proposal.
three-year
without books.
proposal.
It's a
Okay.
3-year plan.
Okay.
Without the additional. It actually has the books in it, just across 3 years.
But what we could do to honor what Mark is saying is to say, approve the first one with the idea that we will definitely put the agenda item or the conversation on a future meeting.
Yeah,
But we're supposed to be discussing the amendment right now.
Which
and
is
then we're
the-
gonna
Which I think
vote-
is what he
Yeah, the
is.
96,000,
Okay,
I believe.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
But we can vote when we're done discussing.
Any other comments on the amendment?
Well, I think from my perspective, I would agree to that. I would certainly publicly commit to having that discussion sooner rather than later. I want to have that discussion, but I want to have it as it pertains to the budget as a whole. And what can we do that's most effective within the confines of our budget?
I agree.
Okay. Well, then I will say, going forward, we're committed to having further budget conversations as well.
Yes.
Yes.
That's something we're all interested in. That's great.
Ready to make a vote, but just one last time. Staff have you had discussions with staff? Is this something that staff supports, the letters training, or at least at this level that we're speaking of right now?
We have had initial conversation with a few interventionists when we were discussing this situation with MDE, and Karen went to the letters training, but it has not been a conversation that we've entertained as a group of interventionists or with staff.
But
Okay,
if
so-
we were to take Mark's idea of putting it on a commitment for future conversation, that would allow time for
We would have those
staff to be
conversations.
involved as well.
Director Riley?
I can't support the vote for the curriculum without this piece in there. I think if we establish the train the trainer model and get the interventionists and the instructional coaches on board and get it moving and get it going, I think that would be super beneficial to the kids, because in the end, we're not doing as well as we could be. And that's what's really important.
Thank you. Any other further comments about the amendment? If not, then did you have something further you wanted to share? Okay, so I think at this time, let's vote on the amendment to the original motion, which would add the letters training for interventionists and instructional coaches to the plan. Can we vote on the amendment? All in favor, raise your right hand and say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
We have 4 in favor and 3 opposed. So the amendment passes. So now we need to go back to the original motion as amended. The original motion is to pass the 3-year plan at a cost of $502,000 with the addition of the interventionists and instructional coaches getting the letters training as just a way for us to get started. Do we have any further conversation about that? Okay, hearing none, let's go ahead and vote on the motion as amended to approve the literacy proposal with the interventionists and instructional coaches added to the plan. All in favor, raise your right hand and say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
1 opposed. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can we clap after that? Yes, thank you.
All right, moving on. The next item on our agenda is item C, the BWBR Architectural Services. Director Hoheisel.
Thank you, Chair Stivlin, Superintendent Pontrelli, school board members. BWBR it is proposed that BWBR provide architectural services for the up-and-coming summer long-term facility maintenance projects. These projects will replace facility finishes, design restroom layouts, and replace roofing systems. BWBR will create bidding docs, review bids, provide contracts, approve submittals, issue change orders, and certify payments and monitor construction progress. I'd just like to step away from at least the cover page and what I just read and say there's been some conversation both with when Director Potacek was chair and then now with Chair Stivlin and Vice Chair Pearson about BWBR and the summer projects and kind of why are we where we're at. And I guess just for a very brief history lesson of kind of what's happened. So back in 2017, it was January of 2017, the school board at that time approved a list of service providers, one of which was BWBR as our architectural service. Since then, back in December then of 18, knowing that Brookview, or at least at the time, Brookview addition was on the table, the board had chose to, or the guidance was go out and get RFPs for architectural services for the Brookview addition, of which we did. Submitted that, sent that out in December, received responses in January. The finance and operations work group reviewed those proposals. Then that was placed in front of this board in March of 2019, and that got tabled, in part because the Brookview decision got tabled. And then we went out for an architectural RFP again. That was to facilitate the CDT process. And so we've gone out for architectural services on 2 different occasions for 2 different things. And I know one of the questions was, why haven't we done it again for this? And honestly, given the status of the RFPs and what was proposed as a list to move forward with and has since been at least paused, we haven't. So we default back to who was our last approved architect, which was for projects, which was BWBR. One of the questions that had come up was, why do we need this now? I did provide, and Sherry has the document, so if anybody in the audience would care for them, we can certainly give you a copy after the fact. You're provided a timeline, and the best way I can explain it is usually what's coming out of my office is the start of all processes. If we're looking at summer work, that needs time. We're usually 5 to 6 months ahead of time. You do have that. You also have a list of what projects would the architect that you select to do summer projects would be working on. That list was provided as well, and you have a list of all summer projects, what's out there and what's open. So just know that was the additional handouts that I placed in front of you. And so at this time, I'm just looking for you to approve architectural services so we can get the process of our summer projects started.
Should we start with a motion at this point? Can I call for a motion to approve BWBR as the architect for our summer projects?
So moved.
We have a movement of we have a movement. Do we have a motion? Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Now let's have some discussion. Director Potacek?
If the motion passes, I understand what happens, all this. If the motion does not prevail, what happens?
I would ask if you have a different architect that you would like to, give the business to tonight. That's certainly an option. Should you not move forward with any architect, it's probably likely that we're certainly going to be under the gun, but quite possibly not be able to complete some of that summer work, if not all. Just because, again, that's why the timeline is provided. It's just, it takes a while to go out, to do the work of going out, speccing the projects, going out for bid, reviewing the bids. So,
Director Weisberg?
I guess I'm just confused because most of these are over the 175,000 that says we have to go out for bids. So that's my question, is why would we not go out for bids? One of them is 450,000, one's 570,000, one is 854,000, one is 230,000. And so it's two questions really. This isn't just the architect fee, right? It's the architect and construction fee. It's the whole project fee.
the fee that is listed on the sheet of our letterhead is the whole project.
Right.
What you're doing tonight, or what is being asked as a motion tonight, is to prove the architect to do the bid work. They will go out and do all of that. They will advertise. They will create the specs. They will do all of that I listed in my opening. And so, yes, that's going to happen with these projects. It's just we're choosing an architect to facilitate the process.
So to facilitate having the RFPs done for these specific projects. Yeah. And so in the original board packet that we got, is BWBR's fee the 50-something thousand that would cover all of this?
That's our estimate of what they would charge to do this work. Give or take, that's our best estimate of what we believe they're going to charge.
Okay. So then my other question is, I know we did RFPs for Brookview, for the CDT. So if we needed to, if it's time for BWBR to come up, so why did we not do it in the fall? So we would have time to pick if we did want to pick somebody different.
Because quite honestly, there's only so many, if we've had this discussion, there's multiple reasons. So first off, there's only so many RFPs we can do in a year. And my office to date, even though not all have been acted on, have done auditor, again, twice with the architect, once with, twice with construction manager, transportation. I just sent out for proposals for vending services. There's only, that's a lot of volume to do that many, and that's why we stagger and do only certain ones every year, because quite honestly, we don't have the staff to do that. It takes weeks to get one out the door. It takes weeks to review, and then we usually have a committee review it. That's holistically. Why not particularly in this case? It's due to saturation. And I've said this before, when you continue to go back to the well and ask essentially the same industry to keep responding to many things, you're going to get less responses because people want our business, but not when they're turning around, when they invest a few weeks of time into a proposal and we never respond, or we do, you know what I mean? Or they don't get the business, so one got tabled, the other. They too will start to lose interest, prices will start to raise if they don't believe they have the opportunity to be a long-term, for us to be their long-term client. And quite honestly, yeah, I mean, so you're talking saturation, just particular with the architects, you're talking timing, you're talking when the audit got tabled, the auditor got tabled, it was, I don't even know what RFPs we should be going out for anymore, because it seemed like an independent decision and it wasn't. So that's kind of a host of why that didn't happen in the fall again.
I think, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I guess there is some confusion, at least for me. We go out for RFPs for work that needs to be done. Like, for example, we went out for the Brookview, when we were looking at adding on to Brookview, we got design work done. So we could talk about that. We could have pictures and, you know, some information. And likewise with the construction manager, I think we went out for RFPs so that was specific to that project.
Yes.
I think the thing that's hard to understand is this sort of feels more like an ongoing, like all the time, like this is our go-to people. And for me personally, I don't understand how that works, you know, when it's, why do we just have a list of people that we go to? Why don't we go through RFPs for projects when they arise instead of like having this automatic list that we go to? Do you know what I'm saying?
So and I'm going to paraphrase and tell me if I'm getting your question correctly. Why are we not doing this annually? Why do we declare someone to be, this is who we are for a period of time, absent project-specific reasons? Is that what you're asking me?
Yeah, kind of, yeah.
So,
because like it's not a contract, right? We don't have a contract with BWBR to do that work, right?
It would be signed. I mean, based on.
I mean, once we approve this, we would.
Yes.
Right, but up until this point, we didn't, like, we don't have an ongoing sort of like agreement with them.
Honestly, I personally believe your prices would go, if they believe you're bidding their business every single year, prices are going to be higher. Because again, people tend to, if they know that even they're going to have your business for a few years, the learning curve goes away for them. They're not coming into the district trying to learn the whole district for a one and done.
So you're building a relationship.
You're building a relationship. Okay. There's that component to it. There's the component of, quite honestly, ISD 834 doesn't have an RFP writer. That's why we hire people to go and help, you know, to do this work. We just don't have the staffing to support the amount of work. And so it's a relationship piece. I would argue it's a financial piece for a period of time. Again, I think you lose interest when you're doing it annually. Vendors aren't as inclined to, they're looking for the long-term relationships. They're not necessarily looking for ones and dones.
Okay.
Then the honest flow of the work, why you would declare, and not in this case, I mean, this is summer projects. We do this every year. So meaning we'd be doing an RFP every year, but what happens when you have a random something come up? What happens if a cabinet falls and there's asbestos? You know, like you have a little thing here and a little thing there. Then we're not even engaged to be, I have no authority to go back out and kind of do a one-off that we couldn't have expected that would have put us now 4 months behind to go to the, so you want to identify someone for, I mean, you did it with a financial advisor. Can you run this number? I can call them up, I can get a graph. They're kind of in the business of doing that, as opposed to every time we need something, it's like, well, who do I go? You know what I mean?
Right, and I think it's that bigger picture thing that is what we're wanting to maybe look at, you know, or is it time to make a change there? Or at least, you know, I'm going to let you take it.
Thank you, because I think that's where we want to get. I think we want to be on a kind of 3-year cycle where we're going through all of, not just architect, construction manager, 4-year cycle, I apologize. So that, I think that is part of part of the discussion tonight is this is to be approved so we can get our summer work done. And we can go out for an RFP for general architecture anytime. We could start that next week if we wanted to for our general going forward. And then we'll have to make a decision for the bond if we're going to have a special project architect. But that's, this is just to get us through next summer. I think we are in the place in the cycle where it would be natural to go for RFPs going forward for who we would choose for the next 3 or 4 years.
I just had one quick question. So you said we can only do so many RFPs in a year. Is there a number we're limited to, or?
I mean that just by sheer staff.
Okay.
I don't mean that because we're limited by any law or any statute or anything. We just literally don't have the resources to approach them all at once.
Right.
And honestly, I would say the staggered approach also levels out your work. You're always reviewing 3, 4, whatever it is a year, as opposed to, if you think of the volume at what could be at committee work, if all of a sudden you have 15, that's a lot of time where if you get a nice cycle, no different than what the curriculum cycle could or should or is, every so often you know what's coming, you know where it is, and of course, if you were ever unhappy, you can do whatever you need to do, but at least it establishes people know where we are on this cycle. It's a metered amount of work for everybody involved.
Director Patrick?
So what you've proposed here, there's a motion on the floor to approve this, and if the motion passes, all this gets done.
Yes.
So you could, if you're worried about those projects being completed, you could have an amendment that says, okay, for this work, we're going to use BWBR, but after that, for following projects, years, et cetera, we're going to open up the bidding process.
And I would ask, I get a little, this is the list as we know it back to what do I do if there's a random something that comes up? So I get a little bit concerned about this is the only list. It's please identify it as summer projects to allow a little bit of flexibility in the event we need it.
Right.
Okay.
Of course,
So
we won't hold you to the list.
Yeah. Or give direction of when, this is it, but we're going to start the Kristen, you're telling me to start the RFP process, and, we can complete that and have a decision by June, whatever.
So what I would like to do is to amend this. In other words, the original motion is to get these things done, but then I'm saying subsequently to put out a request for proposals for architects in the future after these are done.
For general services.
Yeah.
Yep. I'll second that.
Okay. So we have an amendment to the motion to approve BWBR for the architect for the summer projects, to include an amendment that says going forward beyond the summer projects, we will go out for RFPs for potentially new architectural firm.
But it could be BWBR puts the
I'm
best
sure they'll
proposal
submit.
in there. as
Yes.
well.
Dr. Riley?
I have well, first, I met with Kristen today, and we kind of talked a little bit about that earlier today, moving forward as far as the working group that we're in. So this list, can you explain the process a little bit? If this gets approved, BWBR does the work. None of this comes back to the board except for the final approval of the paycheck? Is that how that works?
For BWBR.
Yeah.
Just for BWBR, but for whoever's doing the work,
That are over 175.
that will come back to
We're gonna
us.
see the
Projects have been
individuals?
approved.
Oh, right,
They're
for
part
through
of-
the
are
long-term
they part of long-term
facilities
facilities?
maintenance.
Yeah, the project list has already been approved. Now we're just trying to execute the
I
list.
want that sheet.
Just out of curiosity, how long have these projects been? Approximately when did the architect start working on these projects?
You're saying, are you talking every year when they're doing the work?
No,
or are
I'm
you
just saying,
talking-
like, you're saying that if we were to not want to go to if we were not going to approve this tonight and not have BWBR be the architect and start over.
I wouldn't
How
start,
far
I'd say
beyond-
pick an architect and let me call him tomorrow.
Well,
That's really.
I'm just wondering if work has already been done with some of this work, some of the pre-work has already been done with them.
No, well, Not for, necessarily for summer projects. I mean, not anything that's billable, or
So
that they
thing
have
would
billed
take
us for.
The thing that would take us off the time schedule, the appropriate schedule, is just that it would take so long to go through a process to get a new architect.
And to establish that relationship, I think.
Well, and again, they're starting to spec and get the bid docs out, and so it's more along the lines of not necessarily the selection of the architect, but the work that they need to do to get it ready to get contractors to, submit proposals and be ready for summer work. So a year ago, again, that was December that had rolled forward. So we're already about a month behind where we were a year ago, but there has to be certain timelines for them to hit to meet bid process and everything that goes. And so the longer you squish that up, then it gets pushed where schools open again.
Okay, so I think we have to vote on the amendment that after the summer projects are complete, we're voting on using BWBR as the architect for this list of projects. The amendment is that after these projects are complete, anything beyond that, we are going to go out for an RFP to get potentially possibly new architect, at least to consider other possibilities. So that's the amendment.
Just to clarify that, I don't think we'd wait until the project was completed. Because we'd
start
want
the
to have
RFP
somebody in
process
place.
now.
Yeah,
Right.
just to clarify that.
Thank you.
That would be my amendment.
So we would want to start an RFP process now so that when the time comes, if we were to replace BWBR with a different company, they're ready to go. Yeah.
And that was seconded, right?
Yeah.
That was seconded.
By Shelley.
Did you get that, Sherry?
Yep.
Yes, okay. Do we have any further comment about the amendment? We're going to vote otherwise. Okay, let's take a vote on the amendment. All in favor, raise your right hand and say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that's unanimous. So now we have a motion to approve BWBR as the architect for our summer projects, and as soon as possible, go out for RFPs for a new architect for any future projects. Any questions or comments? Okay, let's take a vote. All in favor, raise your right hand and say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. It's unanimous. Thank you. All right, in light of the fact that it's 8:15 and we have further work to do tonight, I am going to make a suggestion that we take a break from the board member reports and the working group reports. We'll have to save those till next time. And at this time, I would like to make a motion to move to go into closed session pursuant to Minnesota Statute 13D.05, Subdivision 3B, for an attorney-client privilege discussion regarding litigation options to address EN Properties, LLC's failure to perform certain terms of the purchase agreement and the city's related denial of an amendment to the bus terminal CUP.
I'll second.
We have a second. All in favor? Raise your right hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Nay? Unanimous. Thank you. We are adjourned.